Welcome to the 1984 Open Mess of the Michigan Company of Military Historians and Collectors. Based on British Army tradition, the Open Mess is a semi-formal banquet in which members of the company are joined by their spouses and guests. The ritual features a piper, the formal entrance of officers, the proposing and drinking of toasts, and a guest speaker. Our speakers are chosen for their ability to give first-hand insight into significant events in military history. Past speakers have included participants in the Battle of Midway, the Doolittle Raid on Tokyo, the Air War over North Vietnam, an Imperial Japanese Navy kamikaze pilot, and the most highly decorated soldier in the United States Army. The speaker for this Open Mess, whom you will meet shortly, is just as interesting. Turn back the clock now and join us at Lake O's East.
Fight Major. Fight Major, our thanks.
To the President of the United States.
To the President of the United States. Fight Major, carry on. It is customary to drink these toasts rising, and I will ask you at this time to all rise. Gentlemen, charge your glasses. After the toast is made, I will ask members and guests to repeat the toast with me if you can hear it clearly. Otherwise, listen to me repeat it if I have heard it clearly. Mr. Vice, your toast.
Sir, the President of the United States.
To the President of the United States. Mr. Grega.
Sir, I wish to propose a toast to all of our absent friends and to all those who have died in the service of the country.
To absent friends.
Absent friends.
Mr. Lancaster.
Mr. Commandant, to the Armed Forces of the United States and the United States Coast Guard.
To the Armed Forces of the United States and the United States Coast Guard. Mrs. Krasinski.
Mr. Commandant, on June 6th, we'll observe the 40th anniversary of the Allied invasion at Normandy. That day has been a symbol of the courage and determination of both attackers and defenders. I propose a toast to the men of Normandy.
To the D-Day participants.
The D-Day participants.
Mr. Alexander.
Commandant,
Sir.
propose a toast to POWs of all wars.
The POWs.
Mr. Krasinski.
Mr. Commandant, The aerial battles of the Second World War have been described as the last of those in which chivalry played a part. Germany's air forces have been known in 2 years, not only for courage and determination in combat, but also for that sense of fair play. Today, young Germans train and fly again in the knowledge that if war comes to Europe, their country is the first battlefield. I propose a toast to the Luftwaffe.
To the Luftwaffe. Mr. Conrad.
Mr. Commandant, to the British Empire.
To the British Empire.
To anyone who's a fan of late-night television, the words prisoner of war could bring to mind a couple of cliches. The first one, of course, is, for you, the war is over. And that phrase is usually delivered by a sympathetic and perhaps envious guard who wishes his war was over, too. The other one is much more sinister and is usually delivered by a German in an SS uniform or a Japanese officer with a samurai sword about 6 feet long. And he's standing over a captured Allied airman, an airman who's frightened but yet determined and resourceful. And he sneers at this poor guy, "We have ways of making you talk." Well, of course, they did have ways of making people talk. And in 3 wars, those Americans, unfortunate enough to fall into the hands of our enemies in the Orient, were subjected to the worst kind of physical torture. Beatings and starvations, lack of sleep for days on end. Today, we're told the state of that art has gone towards chemical interrogations, with medical science or a perversion of it developing drugs that can elicit almost any response without physical coercion. But there's another kind of interrogation, and one that uses for its tools neither the bludgeon nor the syringe, but rather charm and wit and psychology. And our speaker tonight is a master of that art. Hans Scharff was born in what is now the DDR, the East Germany. He was trained in marketing and business. He was employed as sales manager for the Adler Motor Work in South America. He returned to Germany in 1939 on vacation and was promptly drafted into a Panzer Grenadier unit. His command of the English language, however, earmarked him for more important duties, and he went to the interrogator school and finally was assigned to an interrogator's position at Oberrussel. He was a master at the art of psychology, ingenuity, and charm, and he was able to get the answers that the prisoners needed, from the prisoners that the German military needed, and he was so successful that after the war he was invited to lecture on the subject at the Pentagon. He has created a new life in the United States as a mosaic tile artist. His work can be seen at Disney World, Epcot Center, and many locations in California. Ray Tolliver, who is the historian for the U.S. Fighter Aces Association and a prolific author, searched for Hans all over the world for a period of 20 years to find out finally that he lived only a few miles away in the Los Angeles area. Ray Tolliver wrote the book, The Interrogator, and the book brought to the attention of the United States the fact that the true facts of how American prisoners were treated by the Luftwaffe, and that contrary to Errol Flynn's experience, they were treated humanely and in accordance with the laws of the Geneva Convention. The book also brought Hans Scharff into the public light, and he has lectured at the Smithsonian, the Air Force Museum Foundation, Soldier Fortune Convention, and of course here with us tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, the Interrogator, Hans Scharff.
Thank you, Mike. Mr. Commandant, sir, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are discussing a problem every soldier who falls into enemy hands faces, whether he may or may not give the enemy any information. Of course, he may not give him any information because he is under orders to say nothing to the enemy but his rank, his name, and his number. This rule has been modified a little bit by President Eisenhower. When General Eisenhower became president, it was modified a little, but it still stays on the same principle: rank, name, and number, period. I have to give you no more. If a soldier gives the enemy more information, he may be regarded as a traitor. A traitor loses his military honor. He may be discharged dishonorably for having become a traitor. On the other hand, the enemy seeks from him information, and he uses every trick in the world: deception, skill, preparation, beforehand preparation, to get out of the prisoner the answers he needs to know. And I will give you some examples tonight in my talk how this is done. I, as an interrogation officer in the rank of private first class, met the top fighter aces of the United States. It was debatable whether the competition between the different fighter groups was of great value, because they were so eager to score victories, to become aces, that they finally all ended up in my lap. It is very difficult for you to understand the very intricate workings of an intelligence center. I will give you some examples, but it would take me hours to explain to you in detail how the intricate work of 18 different departments works of an intelligence center. There is a good description of Ray Tolliver's in the Interrogator, and Mike was good enough to ship in some of the books. In case you want one, I will be very glad to autograph it for you. I had at my command 18 different departments, which were the tools I worked with. And whenever a prisoner was brought to me, I used these tools, and I shall explain to you how I did it. I will tell you the truth, and you can question me if you wish. If you have any question on your mind, I will answer you. The basic problem to begin with was to establish an identity of a prisoner of war, because anybody could, even a spy, pose as a flyer and come into our camp and snoop around as a spy. Therefore, we made sure that a prisoner was whom he claimed he was. At my guest book, which is on display at the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, is one page which describes that identification business very well. And when I question people, I take, for example, a very famous American ace, Captain Kenneth Smith from Boise, Idaho, who fell into my lap. I said, "Who are you?" He said, "Captain Smith." I said, "Anybody can say that. How do you want to prove? Tell me." He was an Eagle Squadron American who had served first in the Royal Air Force, then in the famous 4th Fighter Group. And he said, "Captain Smith, my number is so-and-so." And I said, "Anybody can say that." And every American then would say, "How do you want to prove it?" They would pull out their dog tag and say, "Here's my dog tag to prove it." That dog tag business annoyed me so much that, and I will tell you later on what I printed on my dog tag. I had exactly an American dog tag made up, and when Captain Smith said to me, "Here's my dog tag to prove that I'm Captain Smith," I said, "Well, and here is my dog tag to prove to you that I am Colonel Bullshit." He wrote that into my guest book, and that's on display at the Air Force Museum. Ladies, forgive me the harsh soldier's language. There will come up some more. But this is the way I showed them that I was not satisfied with just that. Here is my dog tag to prove who I am. And that dog tag of mine made a lot of sense. The departments I wish to describe to you are, the number one, of course, is the so-called cooler. We adopted the British word, the English word, cooler, because the German word Kriegsgefangene is much too long. And that cooler had 250 single cells in which every incoming prisoner was locked up. Now, I was in charge of the 8th and the 9th United States Army Air Force. There was, in Europe, the 12th and the 15th. That was a different department. And I was in charge of General Doolittle's, Jimmy Doolittle, whom I have met, meanwhile, many a number of times, of the 8th and the 9th. And I was completely at home in Manderley, in England, in their different stations where they were. The most famous one was the 4th Fighter Group, then the 56th, and so on. And 33 of them I had to have in my mind, and all their officers commanding them. And the 3 generals of the 3 fighter wings, the 65th, 66th, and 67th was General Orton, General Anderson, and General Woodbury. I have met after the war over here. Now then, these young men, they were usually between 20 and 25, shot down, had a bad time, because first of all, they were lectured by their intelligence officers in England that they were going to have a rough time with those brutal German tin gods of the Third Reich. Well, they were very surprised when I invited them to sit down to have a West Point cigarette. We had special cigarettes made by the Kentucky Tobacco Company called West Point. And every prisoner was very surprised. That's the way it started when I said, have a West Point cigarette. A West Point cigarette? You've got West Point cigarettes? Already, rank, name, and number was forgotten. And these young men were treated like a gentleman. I was brought up in a well-to-do German family where I learned in my youth how to guide a blind man across the street. The principle of my family was that the stronger man should help the weaker one, not vice versa, as it often is in this world. And I figured that the prisoner was the weaker one and I was the stronger one. I had everything at my command. I could make his life miserable, I could make his life more pleasant. And I knew very well that an American officer didn't sell out his country for an extra slice of bread or an extra blanket for his cot if it was a cold night. I knew that very well, and I gave it freely to them, which they appreciated. I took them for walks in the beautiful German woods, and there a well-educated American boy isn't numb. He talks, and if it is about the bird singing in the bush or the beautiful trees or anything, but the rank, name, and number business was soon forgotten. The next thing which helped me very much was the department called BUNA, Beauty, News Out of Booty. Well, many plane was down. Many B-17 was bellied into Germany. There, our technical groups jumped in and scanned that plane and brought out every little scrap of paper they left in there. The last meal ticket gave us indications. As a matter of fact, General Doolittle asked me, and he said, what helped you most during the war on your side? And I said, the escape photographs. Every American soldier was required, being on enemy mission, to carry 5 photographs, passport photographs, in civilian clothes. And when that order came through, the station photographer in England of the American fighter stations photographed all the men in the same suit, the same tie, and the same shirt. And we had a guy, Sergeant Nagel, he's now professor at the University of California in Irvine, who figured out all the ties and the shirts. And when I had a photograph like that, I would say, what does that tie belong to? Or you'd say, that's the 4th Fighter Group in Depton. Or what is them, or whatever. And I could say to a prisoner, well, how's good old Depton? He said, how do you know I come from Depton? I could see it by his tie, but I didn't tell him. That is the way, as an example, how the information through booty works. We confiscated everything what was GI, general issue, but private property we returned to the prisoners when they were shipped to permanent prisoner of war camp. For instance, Gabby Gabreski, America's top fighter ace, with whom I still meet from almost every year. As a matter of fact, a couple of years ago he attended my 75th birthday and flew in from New York to Los Angeles. He was so surprised when I returned to him his private property. His bride, Kay Cochran, had given him a golden wristwatch. And when I opened the manila envelope with his number on it and said, you are being shipped out, you're going on transport, here's all your private property back, he said, oh, my wristwatch. And I said, of course, it's your property. We can take that. If it was general issue, we confiscate it. That's war booty. But private property, we don't touch. So when I came to the United States in 1948, I spent my first Christmas night in his home. And I said to him, Gabby, where's your golden watch? He said, the Russians took it when they liberated us. I had, to show you another department, a good chance to break down such a fine fighter. Colonel Gabreski was written up in the Stars and Stripes as soon as he was lost. He was lost for 7 days. He tried to hide in Germany until he was found by some peasants and delivered to us. The German newspapers brought articles. America's top fighter ace is down. Stars and Stripes printed a story and said, Colonel Francis, middle initial E, Gabreski, is lost. Stars and Stripes. I was a permanent subscriber to Stars and Stripes. We had a press clipping department, that's the other tool I used, which scanned every American paper and cut it out and gave me whatever I needed. And American newspapers were available through Spain and Portugal. So I like Terry and the Pirates. But there was the notice, Francis E. Gabreski is missing. I pulled out the paper and said, when he was brought to my office, Colonel Gabreski, I wished you would have been the famous ace. He said, what do you mean? You sign yourself in Francis S. Stanley Gabreski, and Stars and Stripes talks about Francis E. Gabreski. The newspapers make sometimes mistakes, and they helped me. They helped the enemy. And I said, I am talking about Francis E. Gabreski, who is lost, and he's the famous fighter ace with 28 victories. And you are Francis Stanley. He said, come on, cut it out. I'm the famous ace. Rank, name, and number was forgotten. He wasn't a traitor. He was a very fine combat soldier and a very fine gentleman. And, but there was, amongst those 50,000 people we processed through the intelligence center, one traitor, a young lieutenant who had stolen a P-38 fighter plane, flew it over to our lines and said, I am convinced that Bolshevism is a mess to the world. I want to fight the Bolsheviks. Here I am. Take me. Well, I was speaking at the grand jury in Brooklyn when he was sentenced to 25 years imprisonment as a traitor because he had flown over to our lines. Times changed. He was maybe ahead of his times, which is hindsight. But, and you never know nowadays what a traitor or what a hero is. I mean, I have heard of people going over to the enemy talking on their radio and they become heroes. He got 25 years, Martin Monti. And that was one of the reasons why I came to the United States. I also was asked by the Pentagon to lecture what my achievements were and how I did it. Well, I'm often asked, what was it worth? What did you do? Give me an example. I like to tell how intelligence works. I got the question, and there are standard questions for identification. So in Germany, you have to go through routine. This is bureaucracy. And then there are so-called open questions which come from 101 end, from the high command, from this fighter unit, German. What does that mean? What does the enemy intend to do? Can you answer? And I will find out. One day, I received the question, which is a good example. Our fighter boys have observed in dogfights and in air combat that the American fighters are shooting 10 white tracer bullets in succession. What does it mean? But we don't understand, we don't know. So it is my job now to take the next prisoner and twist his arm and say, what does it mean if there are 10 white tracer bullets shot? It doesn't work that way. One guy, the story is in the book, and if you read it, how he made a slip of the tongue and said, oh, come on, America does never run out of chemicals. We shoot 10 white tracer bullets to show us that we are out of ammunition. What? Out of... No. I immediately wrote a report, and an interrogation officer has to be a skillful writer because the people who read what you have learned must understand the significance of it. And I immediately wrote a report, disseminated it to all the German fighter stations, and I said, if you are involved in a dogfight, air combat, and you see 10 white tracer bullets, you have a sure kill because he's out of ammunition. One day, I lectured to German commodores. Amongst them, one of the great fighter aces, Pips Preller, commandant of the 27th German Fighter Group. And when I lectured, I said, gentlemen, I have a very fine American West Point officer, a colonel, sitting in the cooler. If you want to join me for tea, come and meet him. Then you can really meet an enemy. And they say, oh, marvelous. Let's have tea together with Colonel Stark from West Point. Well, during these fighter boys, I like these men with the dark glasses and the big watches. They are much more interesting. They fly all over your room. The bombers, I hope there isn't a bomber here, they are really the bus drivers of the air. The fighters, they are the playboys of the air. And and the Germans too. So I had a tea party and a German colonel, Commodore, and they were flying all over my room, and I said, oh, by the way, Scharff, the other day I was involved in a dogfight with one of those P-51s, and we were shooting at each other. His expression was out of all buttonholes, and what a fight it was. And you know, suddenly I see this guy shooting at me with 10 white tracer bullets. And that moment I thought of a report you had written. And I said, yes, of course, I know. Did you get another victory? And he said, no, are you crazy? I let him go home. He was out of ammunition, don't you know? That's the way intelligence works. Let me see what the next department is. Yes, we had a department called the Squadron Histories, and there were very fine files printed like the bureaucrats do: United States Army Air Force, 8th Air Force, fighter group, fighter squadron, everything printed beautifully, and the 3 fighter wings were arranged in green files, yellow files, blue files, 33 of them. And I had in my office a working table, something like this, and I had these very secret files. I had to sign in and sign out, all laid out nicely on my working table one night. And I got a call from our commandant, and he said, Scharff, we got so many people, I need room in the cooler. Get these people going out. They go work overtime, I don't care. So in the night, I started working on some POWs, and I called the cooler and said, bring over another prisoner assigned to me, a fighter. And in came a young lieutenant. He saluted me. We usually exchanged courtesies. And first of all, he went to my working table, and the moment he entered my door of the office, I said, oh my God, all the secret files are lying openly, nicely spread out on my working table. I forgot to put them away. But this guy worked over and looked through all the American organization, picked out his file, came to my desk and said, reporting signal lieutenant, and handed me his file. He thought that was the procedure. Well, I learned my lesson. From then on, I left them lying there, and whenever a prisoner came in, I said, go and look for your file. Squadron Histories. As a matter of fact, when I showed one of the top aces, General Johnson, now a general, his story, his life story in my file, when he didn't want to tell me anything of the 56 fighter group, he thumbed through the whole file and threw it down and said, this breaks my heart. I knew his mother's maiden name. Then we had a so-called Y department, the listening in boys, English-speaking German soldiers who were sitting there with radio and writing down every word what was spoken in the air 24 hours. That produced a volume every day this thick, like the Chicago telephone book. And I had to read through this. Sometimes I just thumbed through. Every word spoken by the enemy, from ground to air, from plane to plane, from plane to ground was recorded in English, brought to my desk, and I could read through it. Of course, then I knew all the frequencies. I knew which frequency belonged to what secret call sign, and an American would never tell me his secret call sign until we captured a command car with a new code, which the Americans didn't even know yet. But the new words they were getting, I had it already. And one day I thumbed through what was called the situation of the air, and I saw strange remarks, very, very rough soldier's language. Forgive me, ladies, for quoting these guys. What happened? A fighter group comes flying in low over Germany, and right in front flies White 1, the group leader, and way back, the last one is Purple Heart Corner, Blue 4. And in my book it says, White 1 to Blue 4. Steady boy, there's nothing to worry about. And then comes back the answer, Blue 4 to White 1. No, I won't say it exactly. You can steady my fanny, he said. And he bailed out. What happened was that the group leader in front saw two 109s coming in. And of course, they always get the last one, Purple Heart Corner. And they shot him down, he bailed out. But before he bailed out, he called back his colonel and he said, you steady my fanny. And out he went, and he came to my office. And I said, the way you talk to your colonel, that's no way to talk to a superior officer. And I showed him my book, and he said, yeah, I know, my God, you got that in printing. That worried him. There was a very famous voice calling the secret call sign Sweepstake 2. And these German boys, the Y boys, they heard every day directions from call sign with a very deep voice, Sweepstake 2, Sweepstake 2, Sweepstake 2. One day we caught Captain Silverman, Sweepstake 2. We caught him. And I said, I'll take you up to our listening in tower, way up on the mountain, where these guys are listening in. And without telling them who I was bringing as a guest, was just an American captain, I introduced the bunch of them, and I said, this is Shorty, and this is Blackie, and so and so and so and so, the Germans. And he said to each one of them, shaking hands, how do you do? How do you do? How do you do? That's Sweepstake 2. And it was. And he said, come on, listen into the radio and find out who your successor is. And the odd thing occurred right in the middle of the war, that the secret enemy listens into his own station on the other side. Imagine. We had a fabulous photo lab. I could do anything I wanted in blowing up pictures, and I looked at many a combat film, because I'm sure you understand that whenever a gun was fired, a movie was taking the pictures of the shots. And when a plane was downed, we looked at the shootings. If you do read the Interrogator, you will find a very dramatic story of 7 accused American fighter men I had to defend, who were accused of having shot into the city of Greifswald and killed many civilians. I did have pictures. I delivered them at the Pentagon, where flyers shot peasant women on the field and hunted them like hares, school children on bicycles. But I have never caught one who committed such acts. Some of them, where I had the films, were killed. But I had 7 to defend who were accused of that. And the German propaganda ministry was very keen on showing the German public that they were, as they they propagandized all the time that they were air gangsters. Well, it was a very dramatic story that I found that they were not guilty, released them to the prisoner of war camp, they were returned to me, and I had to re-interrogate these guys, this time in the presence of one of those nasty Gestapo guys, as they are described all the time. Not all the Gestapo guys were nasty, but this one was. He was at my side, I re-interrogated them, and it almost led to a debacle. However, I wrote a long brief in proving that they were involved in the raid, but they personally were not responsible for the killings, and this went right up to Hermann Goering, and one night, 3 o'clock in the morning, I was awakened, and he said, the Reichsmarschall just has given word through that your 7 prisoners of Greifswald are to be freed if they are bona fide combat soldiers. And they were. Well, the leader of this group, of the 7, First Lieutenant Weisel, called me from Bakersfield after 33.5 years by accident. And they knew that they were looking down a barrel. The photo lab helped me once in developing a film, and there was one, I also was in charge of the PRU squadrons, the photo reconnaissance planes, which were unarmed and flew way up photographing our stations, especially in France. Well, I caught one who had made a couple of test shots with his camera before he left England, and what he shot was his own airbase. And we developed that, and I had a beautiful picture of Mount Farm, which was the place General Roosevelt, the son of President Roosevelt, commanded. I had a beautiful picture of Mount Farm, and there all the ships were lined up, Spitfires as well as P-51s, in a semicircle, and in the middle of the circle was a man working on a jeep, and then all the hangars, and right in front was a P-38 with a number clearly readable, lined up, and I had that picture blown up as big as my desk. And one time the First Lieutenant Prokop came in, and I knew such a lot about Mount Farm, I didn't have to question him, but I wanted to play a little foolish joke with him. And I put that photograph upside down on my table, and I said, Lieutenant, you can go, I know all about you and about Mount Farm. You don't have to tell me any, one question. And I turned over the photograph and I said, what is this guy doing on the jeep there? Ridiculous question. But he looked through the cunning way I was trying to fool him, because the first ship right in front with the number on it, that was his. And he thought every prisoner is presented with a big photograph of a nice ship. Fooling around. Well, then another way of fooling around with prisoners was asking them how many states there were in the United States. Big question. Well, any child knows that at that time, of course, 48. And then we would give them a pencil and a paper and say, write down those 48 states. And of course, in Europe, with those little countries, you know every state and every county, but the United States are so big, we knew that most of the guys would get stuck at 35, 36 and chew the pencil and they can't get together 48 states. And we would say, you claim to be an American, you can't even account for 48 states. You're not an American, what are you talking about? one day, my assistant, Bill Engelhardt, came to me and said, Hans, I found my master. I said, what do you mean? I have a man, an American captain, sitting 28 days in the cooler. That was the longest time we were permitted by the Geneva Convention. The United States did the very same thing. They didn't hold men longer than 28 days. And the only one I know from this end was a U-boat captain who stuck it out 28 days without saying anything. Well, Bill Engelhardt, my assistant, came to me and he said, I found my master. I have a man sitting in the cooler 28 days and I don't even know the squadron he belongs to. If I knew that, I could let him go. But no way. He could be a spy. He could be anything. I said, Bill, if he is such a tough guy and such a fine man, pay him your respects. He's the better one than you are. And you have to pay him your... As a matter of fact, I have a little party tonight, some beer drinking, sing-song party. Bring him along and we pay him our respects. Well, in comes Captain Mozart Kaufmann. Mozart is a funny first name for any German. We are called Hans and Franz and Fritz and Karl, but not Mozart. Mozart, Mozart Kaufmann. And I received him and I said, participate in my little gathering here. We are just friendly, drink some beer. Tomorrow you are on transport, I promise you. No more questioning. Interrogation is through, and you are a very fine officer. So, in fooling around on that evening, I can think of nothing better but that silly, stupid joke with the 48 states. And I said to him, oh, Mozart, by the way, one more question, please. How many states in the United States? And he said, you know, before I answer such a stupid question, I rather sign your guest book. He saw my guest book lying on the table and had some thumb through it. But what he wrote into the guest book, and you can see it at the Air Force Museum, was, Hans, you are slick and sly. I wasn't. I tried to be nice. You are slick and sly, but you make a very good party companion. Yours, Captain Mozart Kaufmann, 48th Fighter Group. I called him the other day. Ray Tolliver called me after 35 years, and he said, Hans, you know something? This is more a personal story. I found the address of Mozart Kaufmann. He is living in San Anselmo. I said, where's San Anselmo? In North California. I took out my road map and I looked up San Anselmo. It's north of San Francisco. And right next to it is a little city called Larkspur. And that's connected by a road which is called Sir Francis Drake Drive. So I get onto the telephone and say, Ray Tolliver had given me his address but not his telephone number. Information, do you have a Mozart Kaufmann in San Anselmo? And the telephone information was very good. She said to me, no, I don't have a Mozart Kaufmann in San Anselmo, but I have one in Larkspur, which is right next door. And I said, oh, that must be the same. Give me. She made the connection, and boom, right there was Mozart. And I said, this is Hans Scharff. And he said, Hans, you beat me to it. You beat me to it. I was going to say, you must be Hans Scharff when you called me. Your telephone. We had a beautiful conversation. Said, remember the time? Oh, sure. And we talked and talked, and I said, how are you doing? And he said, fine. I have a business. And the devil was writing me. I just said, is it on Sir Francis Drake's Drive? And he said, yes. How do you know? You have a file on me. He's convinced. He's convinced I still check on him. Now, we had, of course, we allowed prisoners to write postcards home. And Colonel Stark, the West Pointer, who knew the Army manual very well, of course, came into my office, and he was an oddity. He was from the 12th. And I got lots of odd cases to handle. And I was to take care of Colonel Stark. And he, as a West Pointer, said immediately to me, what's your rank? I said, Private First Class. He said, but the manual and the Geneva Convention says that a prisoner of a certain rank has to be interrogated by the same rank or one rank higher. And you are a private? Yeah, I'm a full colonel. And I said, okay, you want to be interrogated by a general? And I went to my closet and he said, forget it, forget it, forget it. I was going to put on a general's uniform, just for him. And then he wrote, being a very intelligent man, a postcard, tried to deceive us, and wrote to his commanding General Seville of the 12th Air Force in Africa. He said, General, sir, the Germans have a blood and urine test on every one of us. I'm glad to know that your cold is better. And General Seville was very mad with him after the war. And yet, what did he try to do? He tried to inform through us, through our camp, his own outfit, that we had an enormous amount of knowledge. I think I have to come to the close because the time is getting short. I quickly want to tell you, talking about odd cases, that I was commanded to interrogate a British bomber. Of all people, I didn't know anything about it. But he was such an odd case. He flew a Lancaster III, the biggest plane they could deliver a 500-pound bomb at a very long distance. And he was to have flown over England a petrol test. And his ship was loaded with cement sacks. His navigator wasn't the best of navigators. He landed in Czechoslovakia, in Eger, at a German air base. And the German sergeant was once a smart one, shot green, land, he put his gear out, rolled in, and the Germans jumped his plane, German Luftwaffe soldiers, and shouted at the captain, "Hände hoch, hands up." And he said, "My God, the bloody Germans are already in Sussex." Well, we couldn't handle the big bird, so we asked him to please taxi it into one of our hangars. And he politely did, good old sport he was. One more thing. We had nothing to do with the East. Our outfit was called Evaluation Center and Interrogation Center West, Foreign Air Forces West. There was also an outfit East which was dealing with the Russians. We had nothing to do with Russians. But we had about 20 Russian soldiers as handymen who would grow a vegetable garden and who would light our stoves in the offices and clean them out as workmen. And these Russians were allowed to take a shower once a week on Saturday afternoon. Well, the whole city of the little village of Oberursel knew always when it was Saturday afternoon when they heard the Russians taking a shower, because you can't imagine what ruckus they started in shouting and slapping each other and whistling and screaming. Unbelievable. And that shower was in the basement of the cooler. one Saturday afternoon, the guardhouse called me and he said, Scharff, there is an American lieutenant, a fighter, sitting in the cooler, and he wishes to be immediately interrogated. I said, yeah, send him over. He came in, white in his face, and he said, sir, I'm going to tell you anything you want. I can't stand that brutality going on in the basement. Now, if you will, you can ask me questions, but before I conclude, I would like to tell you my favorite story. I had become very well known amongst the higher circles of the High Command in Berlin. And one night, by reports I had written, and one night the commandant called me and he said, Scharff, we are going to be inspected by General Field Marshal Bevo Schmidt. He's coming in tonight to inspect us. And please be at your desk and work, because he is going round to see the whole camp. So that was my order. I was at 8 o'clock at my desk, and suddenly a big crowd of high-ranking officers are shuffling down the corridor, the adjutants, the field marshal himself, of course, and the commandant stuck the head through my door, and she said, ah, Scharff, are you still at work? I was ordered to do so. He told me. And I said, yes, sir, still working. And in is ushered His Excellency with all his staff, and a lot of fruit salad, and brass, and red stripes, and white stripes. And my office wasn't big enough. They were sitting at my working table around. And he said, I have read your reports. Now, I want to know how you do that. I want to know it. And I said, Your Excellency, I have, show me. He said, show me. Go on, show me. I said, Your Excellency, I have 3 different categories. I have American fighter boys who came in today. I haven't even seen yet. I don't know who they are. I have some I talk to. I go for a walk in the woods. I have some which are going out on transport. Which one of those categories, which one would you like me to interrogate? He said, start from the bottom, right from the beginning. Take a man you have not seen before. So I called the guardhouse and I said, bring over Lieutenant so-and-so. After a short while, a young American fighter lieutenant walks into my room and sees all that brass and fruit salad. And I got up from my desk and I said, I'm your interrogation officer. Sit down, take it easy, have a cigarette, and don't worry about all these guys sitting around here. You have to tell me some questions. Well, here comes the old game. Rank, name, and number. Rank, name, and number. It's getting very boring. I said, you have to tell me more. I don't believe it. All my tricks didn't work. Rank, name, and number. 20 minutes. Getting very boring. I can notice it on the faces of the others. And suddenly this young man gets up from the chair. He was sitting in front of my desk, goes over to my window, stands at ease, and starts telling me all kinds of questions. Where are you from? What ammunition have you been carrying? What have you been attacking? What was your mission? One question after another. Fantastic. And I said to Schmidt, Your Excellency, as you can see, I am in good conversation with my prisoner, and I would think it is much better if I continue my conversation alone. And he said, oh, I see, you want to throw me out. I said, yes, Your Excellency. And he said, why isn't this man decorated yet? Does he drink too much schnapps? And out he went. As soon as that whole bunch of officers had left my room and the door was closed, this young American kid came over to me, laid his hand on my shoulder and said, did I help you out of a mess you were in?
Thank you very much. I think that in addition to entertaining us, Hans Scharff has certainly illustrated that a sense of honor and rank do not necessarily parallel each other. I'm sure we have all known officers, those of us particularly who have been in the service, of much higher rank than private first class, who have less sense of honor about the conduct of war and the conduct of personal affairs. And it has been a privilege to all of us to hear you this evening and have you as our guests. Thank you very much. Steve Cook, as our awards chairman, has a presentation to make to our guests this evening. Steve?
Yes, on behalf of the Company of Military Michigan Historians and Collectors, I'd like to present this director's chair to you. And in the arm, there's a plate that says, presented to guest speaker, Hans Joachim Scharff, the Interrogator. And the date.
Very nice.
And I want to thank you very, very much.
In Hollywood, we call that the director's chair, right?
If any man deserves a director's chair, a man who can tell a field marshal to get out of the way so he can get on with his work. Qualified. We do have a commandant's party following this event. It is at Mike Krasinski's home. I won't try to explain to you how to get there from here. It is some distance. It is worth the trip, but it is some distance, and I would simply advise you to tag into the caravan of a member who has been there before. I also want to thank all of our guests and our members for attending this evening. This has been, I think, the best attended open mess we have had in many years. And
in that hospital, no Germans were allowed except the doctor, an orderly, and myself and a friend of mine, Horst Barth. And at Christmas '44, the commandant of our camp had given every wounded American, British soldier some red wine and some cookies, Christmas cookies, typical German Christmas. And in the hospital, those who could walk on crutches and so on, they all got around at a huge big table, and the highest rank of prisoners who was wounded, very badly wounded, was the British Air Vice Marshal, Sir Ronald Ivelore Chapman, who is in the book. And the next one was an American, Colonel Miller. And we gathered together, and the German nurses were not supposed to see the prisoners, but they were singing some German Christmas carols behind the screen, because there was a law that the prisoners were not supposed to get into touch with women. So those poor nurses and sisters, they were sisters of mercy, they were singing Silent Night behind the screen. And then the wine was dished out and the cookies, and the doctor, my friend Horst Barth, who was in the book, and I, we were sitting with the prisoners at the table, and the cookies were out, and the doctor said to us, who was in command of the whole hospital, very, very dear friend of mine, and a violent anti-Nazi Hitler guy. Violent. I was not, but we were still very good friends. So everybody sat there silently and didn't drink and didn't do anything. And Felix Ittersheim, the doctor, said to me, come to my private study, and the Horst Barth. And we went into his private study, and he said to us, don't you know, you two fools, what they are, why they don't drink out there? Because the Air Marshal will say, to the king. And the American will say, to the president, but not in our presence. We've got to go out. And what is left to me but to say to you, sad sex, Heil Hitler. That's a true story. And Felix Illersagen, the doctor, he was loved by and he was one of the very few German orthopedians who were licensed. There were only 4 during the war, which was something very new, to do bone nailing, if you know what that is, to put a nail right through the bone. And some of these guys were smashed up, you can't believe. And they were delivered to the hospital. Oh, I love that one. Yeah, this is incredible. Where do you get all this from? The hearers?
Formality of the open mess is followed by a less formal commandant's party. This gives all of the attendees, including the guest speaker, a chance to get to know each other better and just to talk about what's gone before and subjects of common interest. In this case, it gave Hans Scharff the opportunity of getting reacquainted with some old familiars.
Well, these guys over there, I didn't like at all. What? The boys.
Die Kettenhunde?
Yeah.
Well, who wants the Kettenhunde? They're they're bad news, period. That's why they call them the Kettenhunde.
What?
You know what Kettenhunde?
This was that clinic belonged to Rudy Van Dryden, who was of course the last commandant. That's exactly into and out of Berlin. That's right. In Fleeser Storch.
Yes. I was supposed to translate your book.
Flying is My Life.
Hannah Reiches.
Yes.
By the Whirlybirds. They wanted, they adopted her, you know. But I think it is politically, her flying achievements are
Oh, that's right. In the V1.
And you know that she flew in Tehachapi.
No, I didn't know that.
Well, we have a sailing station where the astronauts are trained for gliding. That is in Tehachapi. What's the yellow one there?
For signal. That's the walking out uniform, Army uniform. Signal lieutenant. And the green is for mounted troops and enlisted men.
Yeah.
Yes. And this one
This
here?
1915 general officers.
1915. You see the second Red Cross,
Yes.
the Hanseatic?
Yes.
That my father had. He had first, second, and the Hanseatic Cross. And I don't know what he had to do with the Hamburgers. Now, Sabine's grandfather was the commanding general of the 76ers there, the famous 100 Reds. And your 3 brothers fell in the war, all serving in the Hamburg 76 regiment.
That's an interesting, that's the walking out.
The Michigan Company of Military Historians and Collectors is basically a group of people interested in the history of changing armed conflict and its effect on people, politics, and even technology. Individually, we may be collectors, model builders, figure painters, war gamers, or amateur military historians. All of us share the desire to extend our area of historical interest and share it with others. To do that, we meet once a month throughout the year and hear either one of our members or a guest present something from his area of interest or expertise and exchange information and share our collections or creations with the group. At our monthly meeting, which follows cocktails and dinner, a volunteer member or guest will give a short talk on some facet of military history. Often these programs are illustrated with visual aids. To illustrate the wide diversity of interests present, we have had recent programs on the effect of weapons development on tactics, Richard the Lion-Hearted, the Nazi Holocaust, Roger's Rangers, and Peter the Great's conquest of the Russian Empire. The primary event on our social calendar is the open mess which you have just witnessed. The Michigan Company also supports, where it's appropriate, public and private institutions who are dedicated to the preservation of our heritage and an increased understanding of it. Our regular meetings are held on the second Monday night of each month. Cocktail time begins at 6 o'clock. The dinner meeting will begin at about 7 o'clock. Generally, after the program, we adjourn and go home at about 10:30 in the evening. If you're interested in joining us to observe the organization in action, just contact any member of the Michigan Company. Guests are always welcome at our regular sessions, and if you choose to join us, that is the time to find out how to go about doing that too.